The air in a courtroom is a special kind of cold. It's not about the temperature. It's the chilling absence of hope. For Amelia Croft, 7 months pregnant and fighting for her future, that cold was seeping into her bones. Across the room, her husband, Julian, sat with his lawyer, a man she no longer recognized. And next to him was Isabella Vance, the other woman. As the proceedings began, a smug, triumphant smile played on Isabella's lips. It was a smile that said, "I've already won." And when Amelia's world suddenly tilted and went black, that smile only widened. She thought it was over. But what no one in that room knew was that the real truth wasn't in the legal arguments, but sealed in an envelope on the judge's bench, a truth about to detonate everything. Life for Amelia and Julian Croft had once been a carefully curated masterpiece. Their sprawling home in a leafy suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina, was a testament to Julian's meteoric rise in the tech world. He was the visionary behind Innovate Dynamics, a company that had revolutionized data security. Amelia, a talented art historian, had put her own career on hold to support his curating their life instead of a gallery. She designed their home, hosted the perfect dinner parties for investors, and was the graceful, intelligent wife who made his success seem effortless. They were that couple, the one people envied. Good-looking, wealthy, and deeply in love. Or so Amelia thought. The first crack in the porcelain appeared on a Tuesday. It was subtle. A late night at the office, which wasn't unusual, but this time he came home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't hers. Something floral and audacious, completely unlike her own subtle vanilla-based scent. When she mentioned it, he'd laughed it off. "Must have been someone in the elevator, darling. You know how those things are." Then came the text messages. He'd angle his phone away from the clipped formal conversations with someone he only referred to as Vance from marketing. "A real shark," he'd said, with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Necessary evil to get the new product launched." The real fracture happened the day she saw the charge on their joint credit card statement. A single extravagant purchase from a high-end jeweler, La Vie en Rose, for a piece she never received. It was a delicate, custom-made diamond necklace spelling out the word eternity. When she confronted him, holding the paper statement in a trembling hand, the carefully constructed facade of their marriage didn't just crack. It shattered into 1,000,000 irreparable pieces. He didn't even have the decency to lie well. The denial was weak, his eyes shifty. It was a corporate gift, Amelia, for a client. A client named Eternity. She asked, her voice barely a whisper. That was when the coldness set in. The charming, attentive man she had married was gone, replaced by a ruthless strategist. He admitted it all in a flat, emotionless tone. Her name was Isabella Vance. She was the new vice president of marketing. Yes, they were in love, and yes, he wanted a divorce. The conversation took place in their sun-drenched living room, the same room where just 3 weeks prior they had cried with joy when she told him she was pregnant. He had lifted her into his arms, spinning her around, promising their child the world. Now that same man stood across the marble floor, his face a mask of indifference. "And the baby?" Amelia asked, her hand instinctively flying to her barely-there bump. Julian's eyes, once so full of warmth, flickered with something she couldn't name. Annoyance, inconvenience. "We'll handle that through the lawyers," he said, as if they were discussing a line item in a budget. "I need you to be practical about this, Amelia." Practical. That's what he called it. The dismantling of their life, the public humiliation, the utter betrayal of every vow they had ever made. Over the next few weeks, Julian moved out, and Isabella moved in. Not into his new apartment, but into the public sphere of his life. Pictures began surfacing on social media. Julian and Isabella at charity galas, on a weekend trip to Napa, her neck adorned with the Eternity necklace. Isabella Vance was everything Amelia was not: bold, raven-haired, with a sharp, predatory beauty and an ambition that matched Julian's. She wasn't just replacing Amelia in his bed. She was usurping her entire life, and she did it with a triumphant, unapologetic glee. Amelia, meanwhile, was left to pick up the pieces. She hired Marcus Thorne, a seasoned, empathetic lawyer who looked at her with kind eyes, but spoke with the unvarnished truth. "Amelia," he said during their first meeting, his office filled with the comforting scent of old books and coffee. "Julian is worth over $100 million. His lawyer, Evelyn Reed, is known for being merciless. They will not make this easy. They will try to break you." "I have nothing to hide," Amelia said, her voice stronger than she felt. "He's the one who cheated. I'm pregnant with his child." Marcus leaned forward, his expression grave. "In their eyes, that's not a fact. That's a liability. Be prepared, Amelia. This is going to be a war." He was right. The first salvo from Julian's lawyer was a letter that made her feel sick to her stomach. It was a lowball settlement offer that was insulting at best, coupled with a thinly veiled threat: "Accept this, and we can all move on quietly. Reject it, and things will get unpleasant." Amelia, with Marcus's guidance, rejected it. She wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for her dignity, and more importantly, for the future of the child growing inside her. She had no idea how unpleasant things were about to become. The word unpleasant was an understatement. What Julian and his legal team launched was a systematic campaign designed not just to win a divorce case, but to annihilate Amelia's character. Evelyn Reed, a woman with a razor-sharp mind and ice in her veins, began by freezing their joint assets. One morning, Amelia went to buy groceries, and her card was declined. The humiliation was searing. She was a woman who had once chaired fundraising committees, now unable to buy a carton of milk. Julian, guided by Isabella's venomous influence, seemed determined to paint her as an unstable gold-digging opportunist. They filed motions claiming she was emotionally volatile, citing her grief and anger as evidence of mental instability. They subpoenaed her friends, her family, even her former colleagues from the museum, trying to dig up any dirt they could find. They leaked carefully selected details to gossip blogs, creating a narrative of the brilliant tech mogul escaping the clutches of a manipulative wife. Amelia felt like she was drowning. The beautiful home they had built together became a gilded cage. Every object held a memory now tainted with betrayal. The worst part was the loneliness. Friends who had once flocked to their dinner parties now gave awkward apologies, not wanting to be caught in the crossfire. She was isolated, pregnant, and fighting a seemingly infinite war chest with her dwindling savings. Her only pillars of support were her younger sister Chloe and her lawyer Marcus. Chloe would come over with groceries and sit with Amelia for hours, letting her cry and rage and talk to her growing belly. "He can't get away with this," Mia Chloe would say, her own eyes blazing with anger. "He just can't." Marcus Thorne, meanwhile, was her shield in the legal battle. He was methodical and calm, a stark contrast to Evelyn Reed's aggressive tactics. "This is classic scorched earth Amelia," he explained, reviewing yet another motion filed by the opposition. "They're trying to wear you down, to make you so exhausted that you'll accept their terms just to make it stop." The true architect of the cruelty, however, was clearly Isabella. Amelia saw her influence in every move. It was Isabella who was photographed driving Julian's new sports car. It was Isabella who wore a stunning gown to a tech conference on Julian's arm, a gown Amelia had bookmarked months ago. It felt deeply, personally vindictive. One afternoon, Amelia had a doctor's appointment. As she was leaving the clinic, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The tinted window rolled down, and there was Isabella wearing oversized sunglasses that couldn't hide her smug smirk. "Amelia," she said, her voice dripping with faux concern. "You should really be taking better care of yourself. All this stress. It can't be good for the... you know." She gestured vaguely towards Amelia's stomach. Amelia stood frozen on the sidewalk, stunned by the audacity. "Just a word of advice," Isabella continued, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Julian is a man who looks to the future. He doesn't like being tied down by the past. The sooner you realize that, the easier this will be for everyone." The window rolled up, and the car sped away, leaving Amelia trembling with a mixture of rage and fear. This wasn't just a divorce. It was a hostile takeover of her life, and Isabella was leading the charge. The final and most devastating attack came a month before the scheduled court date for the preliminary hearing. It arrived in a thick, formal envelope, delivered by a courier. Marcus had called ahead to warn her it was coming, but nothing could have prepared her for the words she read. It was an official motion, filed with the family court. In it, Julian Croft, under penalty of perjury, formally denied paternity of her unborn child. He was claiming that he had reason to believe the baby was not his, and was therefore requesting the court to absolve him of any and all future parental and financial responsibility. The document suggested Amelia had been unfaithful, and that the pregnancy was a last-ditch, desperate attempt to trap him. Amelia read the words over and over, the black ink blurring through her tears. This was a lie of such breathtaking cruelty that it stole the air from her lungs. He knew. He knew the dates. He knew they had been trying. He had celebrated with her. To deny his own child. It was monstrous. She called Marcus, her voice breaking. How can he do this? How can he lie like this in a court of law? Marcus's voice was grim. He's doing it because he thinks he can win Amelia. He's betting that you'll be too ashamed, too broken to fight it. He's trying to leave you with absolutely nothing. This isn't about money anymore. This is about total destruction. Amelia hung up the phone and walked to the nursery she had started to prepare. The walls were painted a soft, gentle yellow. A small crib was assembled in the corner. She sank to the floor, her body racked with sobs, her hand pressed protectively against her belly. The man who had promised this child the world was now trying to erase them from existence. In that moment of absolute despair, something inside her shifted. The grief and the fear began to burn away, leaving behind a core of pure, unyielding resolve. He would not destroy them. She would not let him. "I will fight for you," she whispered to her belly, her tears still falling. "I promise you. I will fight for you until my last breath." She agreed to the one thing that could prove the truth, a court-ordered, legally binding prenatal paternity test. The sample collection was invasive and stressful, but Amelia endured it with a quiet dignity. The whole time she could feel Isabella's victory smile even from miles away. They thought they had her cornered. They thought they had broken her. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The weeks leading up to the court date were a special kind of hell. Every day felt like wading through cement. The paternity denial had been a public declaration of war, and Amelia felt the shrapnel of it everywhere she went. Whispers followed her in the grocery store. Old acquaintances would cross the street to avoid her. The narrative Julian and Isabella were spinning was working. In the court of public opinion, she was being tried and convicted. But the public humiliation was nothing compared to the private pain. At night, she'd lie awake, her baby kicking gently inside her, and the enormity of Julian's betrayal would wash over her anew. He wasn't just denying her. He was denying this innocent life. He was willing to brand his own child as illegitimate to save money and appease his new partner. The cruelty was so profound, it was almost incomprehensible. Yet as the baby grew stronger, so did Amelia. Her maternal instincts, fierce and primal, began to form a suit of armor around her broken heart. This was no longer just about her. It was about the small, helpless person who depended on her for everything. Every doctor's appointment, every flutter of movement, every tiny hiccup she felt was a reminder of what she was fighting for. Marcus Thorne was her general in this war. He meticulously prepared their case, countering every one of Evelyn Reed's vicious motions with calm, fact-based evidence. He compiled a mountain of documentation, emails, and texts from Julian, expressing his excitement about the pregnancy credit card receipts from their baby moon trip, just before he left sworn affidavits from friends who had been at the dinner where they announced they were expecting. The DNA test will be the silver bullet, Amelia Marcus reassured her during one of their late-night strategy sessions. But we need to build the wall of truth around it, so high that even Evelyn Reed can't find a way to tear it down. We need to show the judge that this paternity claim isn't a legitimate doubt, it's a malicious legal tactic. Amelia, despite her fear, found a new source of strength in the process. She spent hours with Marcus, going over every detail of her life with Julian. It was painful, like picking at a wound, but it was also empowering. She was taking back control of her own story. One evening, Chloe found her in the half-finished nursery, carefully folding tiny onesies and placing them in a drawer. "How are you doing this?" Chloe asked, her voice full of awe. "After that letter, I think I would have just curled up in a ball and never come out." Amelia paused, holding a small, soft-knitted booty in her hand. "I thought I would too," she admitted softly. "But then I realized crying and hiding is what they want. They expect me to be the hysterical, broken victim. They've underestimated me." She looked at her sister, her eyes clear and determined. "They've mistaken kindness for weakness, and they have no idea what a mother will do to protect her child." The day before the hearing, a package arrived. It was a small, exquisitely wrapped box with no return address. Amelia opened it cautiously. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a single, perfect white rose, the same kind Julian used to buy her for their anniversary. There was a small card. The handwriting was sharp and feminine. Isabella's. It read, "Some things are too beautiful to survive the winter. It's better to let them go." It was a threat cloaked in poetry, a final, cruel twist of the knife. It was meant to intimidate her, to make her feel like a fragile flower about to be crushed by the coming frost. But Isabella had miscalculated. Amelia wasn't a flower anymore. She was the winter. She was the storm. She placed the box on the counter, took a deep breath, and continued preparing for the battle ahead. She would not be intimidated. She would not be broken. She would walk into that courtroom tomorrow, not as a victim, but as a mother wearing her armor. The morning of the hearing dawned grey and oppressive, the sky over Charlotte a heavy blanket of unwept tears. Amelia hadn't slept. She had spent the night watching the city lights, her hand resting on her stomach, feeling the steady, rhythmic movements of her baby. It was a silent conversation, a promise of protection passed from mother to child. She chose her outfit with the care of a soldier dressing for battle, a simple, elegant navy blue maternity dress. It was modest, professional, and couldn't hide the undeniable truth of her pregnancy. She wore her hair pulled back neatly and applied just enough makeup to conceal the dark circles under her eyes. She needed to look composed, strong, and credible. She needed to look like anything but the hysterical woman they had painted her to be. Chloe drove her to the courthouse. "You are the strongest person I know, Mia," she said, squeezing her hand before Amelia got out of the car. "Don't forget that." Walking up the grand stone steps of the Mecklenburg County Courthouse felt surreal. The air inside was thick with the scent of old paper floor polish and quiet desperation. It was a place of endings and bitter new beginnings. Marcus met her just inside the doors, his face calm and reassuring. "Ready?" Amelia nodded, taking a deep, steadying breath. "As I'll ever be." The courtroom itself was an imposing chamber of dark wood and stern portraits of long-dead judges. It was designed to make one feel small and insignificant. Amelia took her place beside Marcus at the respondents' table. A few moments later, the heavy doors at the back of the room swung open, and Julian's party entered. Julian looked impeccable in a tailored charcoal suit, his face a neutral, unreadable mask. He refused to meet Amelia's gaze. Beside him, Evelyn Reed walked with a brisk, confident stride, carrying a leather briefcase that seemed to radiate menace. And then there was Isabella. She was dressed in a sharp, cream-colored power suit, her dark hair sleek, her makeup flawless. She wasn't a party to the divorce, so she couldn't sit at the table with Julian, but she took a seat in the front row of the public gallery, directly in Amelia's line of sight, and she was smiling. It wasn't a subtle smile. It was a bright, confident, triumphant smirk. It was the smile of a predator who had cornered its prey and was savoring the final moments. It was directed right at Amelia, a calculated act of psychological warfare. Every time Amelia's eyes inadvertently drifted towards her, the smile was there, unwavering and cruel. It said, "You've lost. This is my life now. You and your little problem are about to be erased." The proceedings began. The clerk's voice droned on. In the matter of Croft versus Croft, Judge Eleanor Davies entered. She was an older woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that commanded immediate respect. She surveyed the room, her gaze lingering for a moment on Amelia's pregnant form, then on Julian, then on the smiling woman in the front row. She missed nothing. Evelyn Reed spoke first. Her voice was crisp and cutting as she laid out their case. She spoke of irreconcilable differences and Julian's desire for a swift and clean resolution. Then she moved to the heart of the matter. "Furthermore, Your Honor," she said, her tone laced with professional regret, "we have reason to question the paternity of the respondent's child. Mr. Croft contends that he is not the biological father, and therefore requests that the court reserve any judgment on matters of child support or custody until this fundamental issue is resolved." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Amelia felt a hot flush of shame and anger creep up her neck. She stared straight ahead, focusing on a crack in the wooden paneling, refusing to give Isabella the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. Then it was Marcus's turn. He stood his presence, a calm anchor in the turbulent room. He methodically dismantled their claims, presenting the emails, the travel records, the timeline of the pregnancy. He spoke of Julian's initial joy and subsequent sudden reversal after the start of his new relationship. "Your Honor." Marcus concluded, his voice resonating with quiet conviction. "This is not a good faith paternal dispute. This is a cruel and calculated legal strategy designed to defraud a pregnant woman of her rights and to deny a child of its birthright. It is character assassination disguised as a legal claim. Fortunately, we don't have to rely on speculation. Both parties agreed to a court-ordered prenatal paternity test. The results were delivered to this court this morning." He sat down. A heavy silence descended on the courtroom. All eyes turned to Judge Davies. This was the moment. The judge picked up a thick, sealed manila envelope from her desk. The lab's insignia was stamped on the front. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. She felt lightheaded. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, suffocating. She could feel Isabella's smug gaze boring into her, feel Julian's cold indifference from across the room. The pressure of the last few months, the betrayal, the lies, the fight, all of it crashed down on her at once. Her vision began to tunnel. The judge's face swam in and out of focus. The polished wood of the table seemed to ripple like water. A roaring sound filled her ears, drowning out the silence. She felt Marcus's hand on her arm, heard his voice, as if from a great distance. "Amelia, are you all right?" She tried to answer, to nod, to say she was fine. But her body had reached its limit. The world tilted on its axis. The last thing she saw was the triumphant, widening smile on Isabella Vance's face as her strength gave out completely, and she slumped forward, surrendering to the encroaching darkness. Amelia came to with the sharp medicinal scent of smelling salts under her nose. A court bailiff was leaning over her, his face a mixture of concern and professional duty. Marcus was beside her, his hand on her shoulder. The roaring in her ears had subsided, replaced by a low, urgent hum of whispers throughout the courtroom. "Easy now, Mrs. Croft," the bailiff said gently. "Just breathe." Embarrassment washed over her, hot and immediate. She had fainted. In the middle of the most important moment of her life, she had collapsed like a fragile doll. She pushed herself up, her cheeks burning. Across the room, she could see Isabella whispering something to the woman next to her, a look of utter disdain on her face. Her collapse was just more ammunition for their narrative, the unstable, dramatic wife. Judge Davies banged her gavel, once a sharp, authoritative crack that silenced the room instantly. Her expression was unreadable, but her voice was stern. "Is the respondent able to continue?" she asked, her eyes fixed on Amelia. Amelia took a sip of water Marcus offered her, and nodded, her voice a little shaky, but firm. "Yes, Your Honor. I apologize." "There is no need to apologize, Mrs. Croft. The court will take a brief recess, if you require it." "No, Your Honor," Amelia said, finding a well of strength she didn't know she had. "I want to continue. I want to hear the results." She would not give them the satisfaction of another delay. Judge Davies gave a curt nod of approval. She looked from Amelia to a stone-faced Julian. "Very well." The judge picked up the manila envelope again. The sound of her tearing the seal was unnaturally loud in the silent room. Isabella Vance leaned forward in her seat, her smile now a thin, tight line of pure anticipation. She had clearly convinced Julian, and perhaps even herself, that this test would be his final liberating blow, the proof that would sever his ties to Amelia forever. Judge Davies pulled out a single sheet of paper. She adjusted her glasses and began to read, her voice clear and devoid of any emotion. "This report is from the accredited DNA Diagnostics Laboratory of North Carolina regarding the prenatal paternity test for the fetus carried by Amelia Croft, with Julian Croft as the putative father. The analysis was conducted using a highly sensitive polymerase chain reaction, or PCR method." She paused, her eyes scanning the document. The tension in the room was a physical thing, a crushing weight. Amelia held her breath, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. The judge continued. "Based on the analysis of the genetic markers, the probability of paternity is—" Another pause. It felt like an eternity. Amelia's world narrowed to the judge's lips. 99.999%. A collective gasp swept through the gallery. Judge Davies looked up from the paper, her gaze locking directly onto Julian. The conclusion of the report is unequivocal. Mr. Julian Croft is the biological father of the unborn child of Mrs. Amelia Croft. He cannot be excluded. The words hung in the air electric and undeniable. Amelia felt a wave of dizzying relief, so powerful it almost buckled her knees again. It was true. It was real. The lie was dead. She risked a glance at Julian. His mask of cool indifference had shattered. His face was pale, his eyes wide with genuine shock. He looked utterly bewildered, as if the laws of the universe had just been rewritten before his eyes. But it was Isabella's reaction that was the most telling. Her smug, confident smile had not just faded. It had been violently erased. Her face, for a fleeting second, contorted into a mask of pure, unfiltered fury and disbelief. Her perfectly painted lips were pulled back in a silent snarl. Her eyes, wide with shock, darted from the judge to Julian, then to Amelia. The triumphant queen had been dethroned in an instant, her victory turned to ash in her mouth. The sheer venom in her expression was terrifying. Her entire plan, built on the lie that she had so carefully planted in Julian's mind, had just been obliterated by a single sheet of paper. A triumphant, almost hysterical laugh bubbled up in Amelia's chest, but she stifled it, turning it into a shaky, relieved sob. She had won. She had protected her child. The truth had won. But Judge Davies wasn't finished. She was still looking at the report in her hand, her brow furrowed slightly. The main event was over, but something else had caught her experienced eye. "There appears to be an addendum to the main report," the judge said, her voice thoughtful. "The lab ran a full genetic panel as part of their comprehensive testing protocol. It seems, Mr. Croft, that in the process of confirming your paternity, the lab uncovered an additional and rather significant piece of genetic information." The courtroom, which had started to buzz with the verdict, fell silent once more. Julian looked up, confused. Evelyn Reed was already on her feet, sensing danger. "Your Honor, with all due respect, any additional medical information is outside the scope of this hearing and is a matter of client privacy," she protested. Judge Davies looked at her over the rim of her glasses, her expression unyielding. "Ms. Reed, when a potential hereditary condition that could directly impact the health and welfare of a minor child is discovered during a court-ordered procedure, it ceases to be a private matter. It becomes a matter for this court. Sit down." Evelyn Reed sat, her face grim. The judge turned her attention back to the report. What she said next would prove to be a twist far more devastating to Julian and Isabella than the paternity result itself. The real bomb was yet to fall. Judge Davies held the addendum, her gaze sweeping over the courtroom, before settling once again on Julian Croft. The air was thick with a new kind of tension, not of anticipation, but of dread. "Mr. Croft," the judge began, her voice measured and deliberate. "The comprehensive panel was performed to screen for a range of genetic abnormalities and hereditary conditions. It is standard procedure in contested prenatal cases to ensure a full picture of the child's potential health needs." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "The test revealed that you are a carrier of a rare genetic mutation on the HTT gene, specifically an allele with an abnormally high number of KG triplet repeats." The medical jargon hung in the air, meaningless to most in the room. Evelyn Reed was already furiously scribbling notes. Julian just stared blankly. Judge Davies clarified, "Mr. Croft, this specific genetic marker is the definitive diagnostic indicator for Huntington's disease." Silence. A deep, profound, and terrifying silence. Amelia's blood ran cold. She knew what Huntington's was. Her art history studies had covered the famous folk singer Woody Guthrie, who had died from it. It was a brutal neurodegenerative disease, incurable, unrelenting. It slowly stripped away a person's physical and mental capabilities, and it was hereditary. A child of a carrier had a 50% chance of inheriting the gene. The report further notes, Judge Davies continued, her voice softening with a flicker of human sympathy, that your specific repeat count suggests a high likelihood of adult onset, typically between the ages of 35 and 45. It also notes that this is a dominant genetic disorder. Any biological child you have will have a 1 in 2 chance of inheriting this gene from you. The implications hit the room like a physical blow. This wasn't just about child support anymore. This was about a child's entire future. A child who now had a 50% chance of inheriting a devastating, life-altering disease from the father who had just tried to deny their very existence. Julian Croft looked like he had been struck by lightning. The color drained from his face, leaving a pasty grayish pallor. He wasn't just a confirmed father anymore. He was a confirmed carrier of a genetic time bomb. His own future, which he had so carefully curated, was now overshadowed by a terrifying diagnosis. All of his wealth, his success, his ambition, none of it could protect him from this. Suddenly a memory surfaced in Amelia's mind, sharp and clear. Julian's father, Robert Croft, a proud, stoic man who had passed away 2 years ago. The official cause of death was complications from early-onset Alzheimer's. But Amelia remembered the strange, jerky movements he'd developed in his final years, the personality changes, the deep depressions his family had refused to discuss. It hadn't been Alzheimer's. It had been Huntington's misdiagnosed, or more likely deliberately concealed by a family too proud to admit the truth. Julian had been living under a genetic sword of Damocles his entire life, and had never even known it. But the most dramatic reaction, once again, came from the gallery. Isabella Vance was staring at Julian, but not with sympathy or concern. Her face was a canvas of pure, unadulterated horror and disgust. Her carefully constructed dream life was imploding. The man she had hitched her wagon to was not the perfect, powerful specimen she had imagined. He was flawed, damaged goods. Worse, he was the carrier of a disease that could be passed on. Her ambition was a cold and calculating thing. She wanted the money, the power, the status. She did not want a partner who would slowly degenerate before her eyes. She did not want a life of caregiving and hospital visits. The man she was looking at was no longer a prize to be won, but a liability to be discarded. The mask was completely gone, revealing the raw, ugly greed beneath. In that instant, everything became clear to Amelia. The paternity denial, it hadn't been Julian's idea. Not entirely. It was too cruel, too absolute. It had been Isabella's. She had likely suspected Amelia was pregnant, and seeing the child as a permanent, expensive link to Julian's past, and a drain on her future inheritance, she had planted the seeds of doubt. She had manipulated a man's ego and insecurity, whispering poison in his ear until he believed it. She had pushed him to deny his own child, all in the name of securing a future for herself that was now, ironically, completely worthless to her. "Your Honor," Marcus Thorne said, rising slowly to his feet. His voice was calm, but there was a new, hard edge to it. This new information drastically changes the nature of these proceedings. We are no longer just discussing standard child support. We are discussing the potential for lifelong significant medical costs, genetic counseling, and specialized care for the child. We will be amending our requests for support, life insurance, and the establishment of a medical trust accordingly. Evelyn Reed looked defeated. Her scorched earth strategy had backfired spectacularly. She had ordered the most comprehensive test possible to look for any loophole to discredit Amelia, and instead, she had handed Marcus Thorne a weapon of unimaginable power. The judge nodded. "So noted, Mr. Thorne." She looked at the shaken man at the petitioner's table. "Mr. Croft, given this development, I am ordering a 30-day continuance for both parties to reassess their positions. But let the court be perfectly clear on one point: your paternity is established. Your legal and financial obligations to this child are absolute." She banged the gavel. "This hearing is adjourned." As the judge swept from the room, chaos erupted. Reporters who had been loitering outside, smelling a high-profile divorce, were now scrambling. But Amelia's focus was on the drama unfolding near the petitioner's table. Isabella stood up, her face pale with rage, and walked not out of the courtroom, but directly to Julian. She leaned in and hissed something in his ear. Amelia couldn't hear the words, but she could see the venom in the delivery. Julian flinched as if struck. Isabella then turned on her heel and stormed out of the courtroom, pushing past a paralegal without a second glance. She didn't look back. Her multi-million-dollar investment had just been revealed as defective, and she was cutting her losses. Julian remained seated, staring into space, a man utterly destroyed. He had lost his wife, tried to disown his child, and had his entire future and past rewritten by a medical diagnosis in the span of 10 minutes. He had allowed himself to be manipulated into an act of profound cruelty, and his reward was public humiliation and a devastating personal truth. Amelia stood up, her legs still trembling. Marcus put a supportive hand on her back. "Are you okay?" She looked at her estranged husband, a man now pitiable in his desolation. She felt no triumph, no joy, just a deep, profound sadness for the man he used to be, and for the child who would be born into this wreckage. "No," she said, her voice a near whisper, "but I will be." She had walked into the courtroom, a woman fighting for her name. She was walking out a mother armed with the terrible truth, ready to fight for her child's life. The fallout from the hearing was not a gentle drift of ash. It was a volcanic explosion that decimated the landscape of Julian Croft's life. The story was a cocktail of irresistible elements for the media wealth infidelity courtroom drama, and a shocking medical twist. It was everywhere. Financial newspapers wrote scathing analyses of the leadership crisis at Innovate Dynamics. Tech blogs rehashed the scandal with glee. Tabloid reporters were camped outside the courthouse Julian's empty office building, and to Amelia's horror, even at the end of the driveway of her home. The media frenzy was a suffocating blanket, but it was nothing compared to the personal implosion Julian was experiencing. Amelia heard about Isabella's departure from her sister Chloe, who had a friend who worked as a paralegal for a firm in the same building as Evelyn Reed's. The story was as cold and brutal as Isabella herself. She hadn't gone home with Julian. She hadn't offered a word of comfort. She had gotten into a separate car, gone straight to the airport, and booked a one-way first-class ticket to Geneva. She left behind her clothes, her car, her entire manufactured life with him. She had executed the most ruthless kind of corporate cutback, and Julian was the underperforming asset being liquidated. His isolation was absolute. A few days after the hearing, when the reporters had finally been shooed away by private security, Amelia was sitting in the quiet of her living room when her phone buzzed. It was a call from Julian. She stared at his name on the screen, her heart giving a painful lurch, and let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the notification pinged. She listened to the message, her hand trembling slightly. His voice was unrecognizable, raspy, broken, stripped of all its usual confidence. "Mia, Amelia, it's me. I'm at the house. Our house. It's so empty. God, what have I done? I know you don't want to hear from me. I don't blame you. But I need you to know. I never would have, if it wasn't for her. She got in my head. She told me. She said you were trying to trap me, that the baby wasn't mine. And I was so stupid, so weak, I believed her. Because believing her was easier than facing what I was doing to you, to us. And now this thing, this disease, I never knew. My father, all those years. Mia, I'm so sorry. I know sorry isn't enough. It'll never be enough. But I needed to say it. He trailed off his words, choked by a ragged sob. Amelia deleted the message. There was a time when that brokenness would have shattered her heart. Now it felt like a distant echo from a life that no longer belonged to her. His apology wasn't for her. It was for himself. An absolution he was seeking that she could not grant. To rebuild what they had would be like trying to glue together dust. Her priority was not his wreckage, but the new life she was carrying. Her focus shifted entirely to the legal battlefield, where Marcus Thorne was now operating with overwhelming force. Their first meeting after the hearing was in his office. "They're waving the white flag, Amelia," he said, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. "Evelyn Reed called me this morning. Her entire tone has changed. They are no longer dictating terms. They are asking for them. I don't want to punish him," Amelia said, her voice quiet but firm. "I want to protect my son." "And that's exactly what we'll do," Marcus affirmed. "We're not asking for a standard support package. We have petitioned the court, citing the extraordinary circumstances, for the creation of a multi-generational special needs and medical trust. It will be independently managed and untouchable. It will cover any and all costs related to diagnostics treatment, counseling, and specialized care that Noah might ever need. We are ensuring his future is secure, no matter what happens." The negotiations were swift. Evelyn Reed knew she had no ground to stand on. Julian, stripped of Isabella's venomous influence and confronting his own mortality, signed everything. The family home, the stocks, the establishment of the trust. It was a complete capitulation. A week later, the news broke that he had officially stepped down as CEO of Innovate Dynamics. The empire he had sacrificed everything for was now in the hands of others. With the legal battle over Amelia began the difficult task of dismantling her old life. Selling the Charlotte house was the hardest part. Every room held a ghost. She packed up the nursery she had so lovingly started, carefully wrapping the tiny mobile of watercolor planets. She remembered Julian helping her hang it, his laughter filling the room as he promised to teach their son about the stars. The memory was so painful, it felt like a physical wound. But as she sealed the final box, she felt a sense of release. She was closing the door on that chapter, leaving the ghosts behind. She found her new beginning in a small, sun-bleached town on the South Carolina coast. The house was a charming, two-story cottage with a wide porch and a garden that smelled of jasmine and salt. It was a place of peace. She reconnected with her old life, her true self. A former mentor from the museum, having read about her ordeal, reached out and offered her a remote project, curating a digital archive for a new exhibit. The work was a lifeline, reminding her of who she was before she became Mrs. Julian Croft. 3 months later, in the quiet local hospital, she gave birth to Noah. He was small and perfect, with a full head of dark, curly hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. Holding him for the first time, all the bitterness and pain of the past year dissolved into an overwhelming, ferocious love. This tiny, perfect person was the reason for it all. He was her victory. A few weeks later, she met with a pediatric genetic counselor. The woman was kind, explaining the science and the ethics with gentle clarity. The 50% chance is just that a statistic, she said. It is not a destiny. Research into Huntington's is advancing every single day. By the time Noah is an adult, the landscape of treatment could be completely different. The most important thing you can give him is not to live in fear of that coin flip. Give him a normal, happy, loving childhood. That is the best defense against any challenge he may face. Amelia took those words to heart. She would not raise her son in a shadow. She would raise him in the light. A year passed. It was a year of firsts, first smiles, first words, first wobbly steps. It was a year of healing, of building a new life, filled with simple joys, walks on the beach, visits from Chloe, the quiet satisfaction of her work. One sunny afternoon, she was at the park, pushing a giggling Noah on the swings. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Chloe with a link to a news article. The headline read, "Fallen tech mogul, Julian Croft pledges millions to Huntington's disease research." The article detailed his new quiet life, his establishment of a charitable foundation, and his public advocacy. It included a quote from him. "There are some mistakes in life that you can never undo. All you can do is try to build something better from the wreckage. This is not about my legacy. It's about trying to ensure a better future for a generation of children, including my own son." Amelia locked her phone and slipped it into her bag. A complex wave of emotion washed over her. A faint echo of the old pain, a flicker of pity for the man who had lost so much, and finally, a deep, settled sense of peace. He was finding his own way to atone, building something from his ruins. In a strange, tragic way, the truth that had been revealed in that courtroom had set them both free. It had freed him from his lies and his ignorance, forcing him to confront a deeper purpose. And it had freed her to become the person and the mother she was always meant to be. Her path was here. In the sun, with the sound of her son's happy laughter filling the air. He was her purpose, her joy, her world. She gave the swing another gentle push, sending Noah soaring up into the bright, endless sky, his future, whatever it held, safe and secure in his mother's unconditional love. That courtroom began as a place of absolute despair for Amelia, but it ended with an astonishing twist of fate that no one saw coming. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the truth has a way of revealing itself in the most unexpected and dramatic ways. Amelia's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the incredible, unbreakable strength of a mother fighting for her child, proving that her quiet resolve was more powerful than her husband's millions and his mistress's malice. What did you think of the story? What would you have done in Amelia's position when you received that final threatening note? Have you ever witnessed a moment where the truth came out and completely turned the tables on someone who thought they had already won? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and perspectives are what make this community so incredible. If you were moved by Amelia's journey from heartbreak to empowerment, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a powerful story of justice, and make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Thank you for listening.